He covers all 4 walls with March Madness brackets. Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports. This week I'd like to talk about the upcoming March Madness tournament, but in particular the Big East tournament that's going to be staged at the greatest basketball arena in the history of American sports, and that's Madison Square Garden, I believe number 3. But this is where really the March Madness tips off. I know that there have been other conference tournaments already played in quote unquote the lower conferences, but those are really dramatic and exciting. I have to be fair, being a Seton Hall alum and also a passionate Seton Hall basketball fan, you know where my passions and my partisanship lead you. I will be rooting for the Blue Pirates. And I'm hoping that, miracle of miracles, they can win 4 straight, maybe gain a number 4 seed. We'll talk about that in the NCAA tournament. I think it's almost guaranteed, outside just a disaster, that the Pirates make the NCAA field of 68. Where they are positioned really is up to them. And we'll get into that because they do meet the winless Georgetown Hoyas, at least in the Big East. And, of course, even though he got a vote of confidence, Patrick Ewing, the coach of Georgetown, is nevertheless still on the hot seat. I got to be honest with you, though. I've watched Georgetown play this year. They're not bad. And I know that's very easy to say, and I'm not trying, and I certainly wouldn't be dismissive of the Georgetown Hoyas. Kind of have a little passion for them in my heart since my cousin played for them many years ago. And in fact, he was on the first team to reach postseason play for the Hoyas in about 40 years when he played for the 70 Georgetown Hoyas. And they lost in an opening round game by 1 point to the LSU Tigers with Pete Maravich on that team. So in romantic terms, Georgetown does have a kind of a soft spot with me, as do all of the Big East teams, the ones that have remained. And we'll talk about that as well because I have a lot to get into. But there are a couple other pictures here, and I'd like to talk about some of the players that sometimes I don't mention. In particular, this gentleman here, Jimmy Gentile, good ball player, typical of that big, strong, slugging first baseman outfielder with really no range, but they could hit you from 25 to 30 home runs and drive in close to 100 runs, usually anywhere from 85 to 90, and hit from anywhere from 260 to 280. So they were valuable. Jimmy Gentile was a pretty good slugger in his day playing for the Orioles. Never realized this when I went through his stats. I didn't realize he was actually brought up by the Dodgers and doesn't hit his first home runs. And I'm going to get into that until about 6 games into the 1960 season with the Baltimore Orioles, who almost won 90 games that year. So, and if all my baseball fans out there know that the Orioles were one time the St. Louis Browns, who never had any great seasons, with the exception of 44 when they lost to the crosstown St. Louis Cardinals in the Subway Series in 1944. And of course, many people don't even consider that, since we were in the midst of World War II, as being a legitimate pennant. Be as it may, they did win the pennant, unlike the other 7 teams in the American League, and did stretch out the great St. Louis team with, of course, Stan Musial on it to 6 games. Anyway, let's just take a look at the Big East. And, of course, I'm going to put this up here. I just want to take a look at the seeding for the Big East. And this is where Seton Hall proverbially shot themselves in the foot and, losing a couple of games that they let slip away from them. I'm thinking about a DePaul game on the road in early January. It was probably their highest scoring game of the year, and they rallied all the way from 19 down to nearly pull one out. DePaul, again, and I'm being very prejudiced when I say this, the Big East really has some good teams. Even the lower echelon teams are very good. And DePaul is one of those teams that's going to be tough next year. They are going to be a tough out in the Big East tournament. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they made some noise. And because they are definitely, if they get eliminated from the Big East tournament, they won't be invited to the big dance, but they will certainly want to gain more experience as a team playing, hopefully, in the NIT. Now, I'm not a doomsayer. I'm not knocking the program. I'm just telling you where it is, because even Seton Hall, with a magnificent finish, and it was at 20-9, their sluggish middle part of the season, getting off into the Big East tournament, really hurt their seeding. Right now, they're in that unenviable position of being in that 8-9 game. And I know that if you are a real basketball fan, you follow the brackets and the bracketology, which goes on all year. I think they have next year's bracketology already set up with the various pundits. But anyway, Seton Hall really shot themselves in the foot by losing those 2 games on the road that could have been theirs. And I'm talking about DePaul, and then losing kind of a controversial game with Marquette, although they had their chances in that. And of course, what made that game worse is that Bryce Aiken, their brilliant 25-year-old graduate student, has been sidelined with a concussion for the rest of the year, which really did strike a blow, not just in scoring, but just in the offensive cohesion of the Pirate offense. And since then, I'll tell you, I know that there are fans upset sometimes with Kevin Willard, but he really is a brilliant coach. And he may, I'm just hoping he continues to build this program and stays here as a partisan fan, because I think most Pirate fans, and of course the administration, know what they have with Willard, a guy who just continues to get better. The team gets better athletes, which I love. I really do love the fact that they have really some good athletes. And I think they could make some waves in the tournament, both in the Big East and in March Madness. But, who am I as a prognosticator? I am terrible. As soon as I will tell you this, always jump on my Michigan pick, because I am always wrong with that pick. And there is some brilliance in being always wrong if you're a gambling guy, because you always want to know who that guy who's always wrong, who he picks, and just go the opposite way. For me, it is Michigan. If I say I'm pulling for them and I predict them to win, inevitably they lose. If I pick against them, inevitably they win. So you should probably that would be the one pick that you should wait for. As of right now, I'm actually thinking they are making the big dance. So I know there are a lot of Wolverine fans, a couple of referees who I work with, that are probably saddened and mad that I've made that pick. Anyway, looking at the tournament, this, I'm going to make, I don't know how controversial this is, but I know that probably big-time college basketball, which has always been part of the landscape. But again, it was almost a niche sport, like really what baseball is becoming today, or what hockey is, where it's very regionalized. I know that hockey has grown leaps and bounds into the South and into the Pacific Northwest. But for most true hockey fans, they still think many times of the NHL as their quaint little 6 teams. With the 2 Canadian teams, Montreal and Toronto, and the 4 U.S. teams, Boston, Detroit, Chicago, and New York. And even I get kind of sucked up in rooting for the traditional teams because I do like the Hawks. Come the NHL, there are teams I really do pull for. I probably even extend that my rooting interest to the 67-68 expansion year, with the Flyers and the Blues coming into the NHL to play. But anyway, basketball was a real regional sport, much like college football. And even though they didn't have a Notre Dame to carry the entire landscape of college football fans, college basketball did have the Kentuckys, of course, the UCLAs, and the North Carolinas that really had the backing of a monster fan base and basically really a monster region. But I'm actually really under the belief that Yes, Bird and Magic Johnson in 1979 when they met in Salt Lake City for the championship game. Of course, Larry Bird led the Sycamores in there with an unbeaten record. And of course, Michigan State led by Irving Johnson, who was only a sophomore. But everybody knew in the nation because he nearly beat Kentucky. And when I say he nearly beat Kentucky the year before, and of course, Kentucky goes on to beat Duke in the 78 championship. Anyway, they do lose to Kentucky. I think it was in the regional finals. Anyway, they came back loaded for bear, and they do win the championship. And of course, everyone knows that great SI cover. I wish I just had it. And, sometimes I just think of these things off the top of my head. It's with, Magic Johnson dunking over an Indiana State player to secure the championship for the Spartans. But everyone thinks that that's really what launched college basketball. And I guess I'd have to say yes, that was the initial bomb on the sports landscape that really got other people who followed maybe basketball, but not college basketball. And I was always a college basketball fan, more so than an NBA fan. But I think many NBA fans realized the brilliance and greatness of college basketball. And what I think really does secure it, and this is where I'm saying about regionalism, is that the Northeast, particularly the Eastern schools, and even the Catholic schools that play college basketball, they really didn't have a forum. They had some great teams. They had some great years. Of course, Georgetown, which I had mentioned previous, had won the NCAA tournament. Of course, Seton Hall won the 53 NIT, and St. John's had won it, and Providence had won it, and Dayton had won it. And Seton Hall, not to trumpet them so much, but they won the NIT when the NIT was really as big or even bigger than NCAA. And people just, mind you, Indiana, of course, I'm not wearing the hoodie this week. I do believe they won the 53 NCAA tournament. Anyway, make a long story even longer. I really believe that Bird and Johnson were a monster catalyst to the interest that we have today in college basketball. But I also believe that one other thing has to come in play, and that is the launching of the Big East Conference. Now, those original schools, of which Villanova was not a member. So you're talking about Seton Hall. And notice, it was all strategy-based. It was all in big markets or potential big markets, with New York and New Jersey being the largest. And, of course, they have two schools there with St. John's and Seton Hall. They have Syracuse in the north, which had been a pretty good power in the Northeast under Jimmy Boeheim. In fact, in the 77 NCAA tournament, they defeated Bernard King and Tennessee. And, of course, he had Ernie, oh, boy, and I'll think of it as I'm going off it, two New Yorkers who played for Tennessee, and they beat them in one of the regional games. Anyway, Syracuse, he was building a nice program in Syracuse with Roosevelt Bowie, Marty Head, Louis Orr, who would become a coach for Seton Hall, good guy. And now he's an assistant with Patrick Ewing at Georgetown. Anyway, they bring in Providence, which under Gavitt had been to the 73 Final Four. They probably may have made the championship game. I don't know whether it would have beaten UCLA had Marvin Barnes, nicknamed Bad News Barnes, had not been hurt. And, of course, the other Ernie that I grew up, besides Ernie from My Three Sons, was Ernie D. Gregorio, who would go on to play for the Buffalo Bills and win Rookie of the Year for the Braves as he played with McAdoo. And he was an exciting ball player, much in the realm of Bob Cousy, not as talented, maybe didn't play as much, didn't play with the great Celtics like Cousy did, but nevertheless was a great, brilliant point guard at Providence. Bring them in. Boston College you brought in. They brought in not Villanova and not Pitt. They don't come in until later. You have Georgetown. So it's Georgetown, Seton Hall, St. John's, Syracuse, Providence, Boston College, and UConn. They would add Villanova the following season, and they would add Pitt the next two, starting with the 82 season, I do believe. Anyway, This was a mega thing. And as I always say, the Mount Rushmore for Big East, it will always be this. It'll be the Syracuse Dome. It'll be Dave Gavitt. It'll be probably, I would say it probably would be John Thompson, but more importantly than Thompson would be Patrick Ewing. Without Ewing, the Big East is nothing in those early years. Ewing brought legitimacy far more than any other player or any coach. Well, you have the brilliance of Gavitt being behind the producer of all of this, the creator of this, but he had retired, and Providence was in a kind of depression there. But without Ewing, without Gavitt, and without that dome in Syracuse, the Big East and college basketball, the landscape of it would be totally different today. So the Big East really owes a lot to Gavitt, to Patrick Ewing, to the Syracuse Dome. And really, okay, I'll even give you this. Probably not just to John Thompson and the early dominance of Georgetown in the Big East, but also, of course, that great year when you had three Big East teams reach the Final Four, St. John's, Nova, and Georgetown. And that great game that was played. I mean, you talk about a team playing a picture-perfect game, and that was Villanova in that game with Harold Jensen nailing everything down in the place, including the backboards with a hammer. And, they go on to win. And really, I think that the Big East really is launched from that, from those early years of basically Georgetown carrying it. And, of course, then you have the Big East Conference Tournament, moving it to Madison Square Garden after a couple of years up in the Providence Civic Center and also in the Dome, but bringing it right to what they call the mecca of all college basketball, and that's the Garden. And it's been pretty much a sellout ever since. And for me, I find it even more exciting than the NCAA tournament. I talk with my buddy about this all the time. And really, outside the first weekend, once you get your upsets and once you get your Cinderellas slipping on the glass slipper, by the second week, you're down to really the Power 5 schools. And yes, there have been a couple of butlers who have gone on to play not one but two championship games. And you have Gonzaga being a big element, a big player out in the Pacific Northwest. But for the most part, let's face it, of the 16 teams that usually remain, I can almost guarantee you that 12 come from the Power 5 schools. And maybe, and I am including the Big East in that Power School of Power 5, simply because of the emphasis of marketing and television and all the rest of it that has really made them a player on that scale, at least for college basketball. Yeah, you'll get your Butlers, like I said, you'll get your Gonzagas, your Loyola Chicagos, and they are still a story. But for the most part, after the first weekend, it's down to really what college football is now with the playoff system. Anyway, what I was looking at with this, if you're a Seton Hall fan, I was looking at, people go crazed over Willard. And I will tell you this, Seton Hall under Willard has really had that, and this is what occurred. It's not unusual for Seton Hall to go through a real slump somewhere in the season, usually in January and February. And under Willard, they have really righted their ship. Do you realize that they've gone 6-2 in February, 8 of their last 10 in February and March? And of course, once again, like I said, they go 3-5 in January. Not unusual, because I was looking at past years with Seton Hall. They've had some good Januaries where they went 7-0, like in 2019 and 20. Last year, of course, in the COVID year, they lost four of 6, and that really hurt them and any of their chances of getting to the dance for the 5th straight time. So that's what they are. That hurt them. But take a look at this. They've gone 3-5. This is January, 2-6, 2-5. And then Actually, as Willard has improved the team, 4-4, 4-4, 3-4, 4-3, had a down year 3-5. Like I said, in 2019 and 20, they were 7-0. In 2019 and 20. Then last year, of course, they were 2-4. They've been 37 and 45 overall until this year. Add the 3-5 this year, and they are 40 and 50 under Willard in January. Now, the unusual thing is, in February, where they have exceedingly gotten better, early years, he's reworking the program. They basically go in their first 5 years under Willard, they win a total of 10 games and lose 28. And then since that time, 6-1, 6-1, 3-5, 3-3, 5-3, 4-2, and of course this year 6-2. So they've had one down year in February. So he gets them better. In March, he's 10-12. He's now 10-12 in March, but that includes both the Big East tournament and also March Madness. So he's basically, let's just say for the sake of argument, he's 500 then. He picks up steam in February, and he gets this team ready. And really, when you think about it, he has traditionally always he's 48-17 in November. Now, I know you play a lot of tomato can programs and stuff, but, he was also playing a couple of good teams there as well. Oregon, he played, of course, Michigan and Ohio State early in the year. In December, he's really had a great run. He's 63-18. And that does include some Big East games where they started the season, let's say December 30th, 29th, or December 31st, okay? This guy is an excellent coach. Excellent. And I think that if he had some more resources, and we all know what they are if you've gone to Seton Hall. It's a small campus compared to others. It's basically in a city or on the fringe of being in the city, which really does hamper you in terms of recruiting and maybe even expanding, the grounds and making it like one of these state schools that have acres and acres of land to work. But what he's done, he's basically taken a team with kind of like a hometown feeling and is really on the verge of, making it not just into a regional power, but perhaps next couple, 3 years, maybe really making it into a bigger power. And a number of things have to occur there. He's got to stay. And of course, Seton Hall really has to do some knocking in the Big East tournament as well as the March Madness tournament. And then hopefully he can put himself and the program on a par with Villanova because they still remain basically a thorn in their side. They do play Nova well. Yes, they did have their 2016 championship over Nova, but they're always just coming up a little short with Nova. I know 2 years ago, they beat Nova in Nova for the first time in like 30 tries, 30 years or whatever. So he's got to make himself an equivalent of Villanova. It's hard to do, though. And that's why you have to admire what he's done with this team. And really what he has done is turn basketball. He's started to use the graduate player and the transfer rule really in his favor. Maybe realizing he's not going to get the blue chip kid out of high school like a Nova can or a Duke or obviously a Kentucky or a North Carolina, but maybe he can get that guy who maybe is a little bit disappointed with his performance or his minutes at a bigger school. And you've seen what he's done in terms of transfer with this program. It's got one of the oldest teams in the league for the last couple of years. He also had the biggest team in the NCAA last year. And he's got a pretty big team now. And what's nice is, although they're not great shooters, and they do allow a lot of second chances, and they do have long periods or stretches where they don't score. They are, and I know I'm being prejudiced, I don't really care. To me, they're the most exciting team in basketball. Notice what I said. They're not the best. They're not the most talented. They're not the best basketball player. Why they're the most exciting basketball players in college basketball? Simply because no game is out of reach for them. I mean, many times I've watched them rally all the way down from 19 with 10 minutes to go, and all of a sudden they get hot. They play great defense, or as the reporters like to say, suffocating or stifling defense. Yes, I've used it too. It seems like those are the adjectives that writers love to use about basketball defenses. But they're never out of a game, and it seems like they can never, ever, ever put teams away. Just witness a couple of games with Georgetown. And in fact, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I was looking at the early things with Seton Hall. And I'm sorry, Rutgers fans and FDU fans, I'm just on a bugaboo about Seton Hall. And I think I'm being fair. What I was compiling is this. Too often this year, and I haven't done the research in the past or anything like that with other programs, but it's anecdotal in nature. But I started seeing more of it, that Seton Hall, this year particularly, one of the reasons why they struggle to put teams away, etc., is simply because they start out cold. And watching the game with my son, Matt, we don't watch or worry about the last 5 minutes of the game. We actually are starting to worry about the first 5 or even 10 minutes of a game. And the thing is this, if Seton Hall gets off, literally, I'm talking about a slow start where they go 4 down, they're down 4-0, 5-0. We actually panic. Now I know we are fingernail biters. We're white knuckler fans. We do all kinds of superstitions like open and close a door or pace back and forth in a pattern, all the rest of it. But what I noticed is that Seton Hall, in many of their losses, they just don't score first 5 minutes. And I do believe that really comes back because now you're playing catch up. 5 minutes is a long time to be down. And I know that there are teams, you could probably say this, well, there are other teams that do that and they rally. For Seton Hall, though, I was looking that they really don't rally as much as I want them to. For instance, in the Cal game, they were behind. I guess they do rally and win. With Nova, they were down before they even knew it. But anyway, I was looking and I said, I guarantee you, of their 9 losses, with the exception of that Nova game that they lost in Nova, they were down in 8 of those 9 at the 5-minute mark. And then at the 10-minute mark. So they're always playing catch up, and it does have a tendency to wear you down. You then get into the realm of causing more foul. And that's another thing too. And I'm sounding like a fan here. It just seems to me that Seton Hall seems to foul more than any other Big East team. I just always look up and it seems like the other team is in a bonus. And here's the aggravating thing about it is that Seton Hall is one of the best free throw shooting teams. And in their losses, if you notice, they don't get to the foul line. Their wins, man, they were unbelievable. In that DePaul game, I don't even think they got to the free throw line until late in the late stages of that game, which they lost, in Chicago by 3 points, a game where they rallied 19 down. They only start getting to the free throw line late in that game. But if they can they got to stop second half chance. They have to stop second offensive rebounds. All right. Giving the other team second chances. I mean, many times in these slumps, 3rd, 4th, and I know you can say, well, they do it. Michigan does it. North Carolina does it. Duke. I know. But these are just the particulars I've noticed. They give up way too many second chance points. They're not really as good at the 3 as would be assumed. And they give up a ton of it. Seems like everybody comes out and they have their Santa Claus day against Seton Hall when it comes to the 3. Connecticut in that first game, that was a great game at the Prudential Building. Man, they were just shooting the lights out in terms of they never missed. And I think it's still the high for the year for the Huskies in that game. Then it was Marquette I was dealing with. Then Georgetown, the first time they met them in D.C., they were shooting the lights out with the 3. So And it's like anything else. They control those threes, keep teams. I'm not even saying stop the threes, but keep them to their average. So if you're making 6, just keep them to 6. Nothing more than that. Get to the foul line, rebound defensively. Oh, and make layups. The layups. Oh, man. There was one game, we counted 12 missed layups in the first half alone. That even if they converted, let's say, 10% of them, 2 or 3 of them, they were in the game. They would have won the game. So they have to do that. All right. So it should be an exciting. Am I giving Seton Hall a chance? Yes, I am. Am I saying that as a partisan Seton Hall fan? Yes, I am. Do I think they can beat Georgetown third time? Yes, I do. Do I think if they beat UConn, would it surprise me? No, it wouldn't. Providence, then they would play Villanova. If they beat Villanova, would that surprise me? Yes, it would. Because I really don't believe, I know they've been playing close games, I don't really think they match up well with Villanova. However, they do with UConn, they do with Georgetown, and I think they actually do with Providence, because Providence and Seton Hall, I'm telling you, you could switch uniforms for the last 5-6 years, and they're basically the same type of team. I really do believe they match up well. Ed Cooley's an excellent coach, probably one of the most underrated coaches in college basketball. I know he's starting to get some ink now, but I felt that way a long time. I remember talking to some reporters that I knew. Yeah, I'm dropping names and dimes, and magazine editors. And Providence is probably one of the most difficult colleges to recruit in basketball, simply because it's much like Seton Hall. It's situated within the city of Providence. It's a very small campus. It probably has the fewest students in attendance going there. I think it's about 2,000. Do I think they can win all 4? Yes. Is it going to be a miracle? Absolutely, positively. It's going to be every game is going to be pounding our knuckles, biting our fingernails. Do I think they can do it? Yes. Now, problem is, if they slip up and lose to Georgetown, I saw them as high as 6th in one of the brackets. And of course, these brackets, everybody has an opinion about where they're situated. But I did like seeing that they were 6th. I know they're on the cusp of making the top 25. I would say if they lost to Georgetown, that would probably put them or cement them as an 8-9, maybe a 10. I wouldn't mind them being a 10. I know that sounds crazy, but if you follow the brackets, 8-9 is probably the worst possible spot you can go. Even though it rewards you for a great season, you're one of the top 32 to 36 teams, and number 10 makes you 40 at worst. That 7-10 is actually an easier, quote unquote, an easier passage into the Sweet 16, because right after 8-9, you got to beat the number 1 team or in the country or in the seeding, and it's almost virtually impossible to do. Anyway, do I think they can beat UConn? Yes, I do. Do I think they can beat Villanova? That's the worry. If they can beat Villanova, and where would they be? They might move up to 7 if they lose to Providence in a close game. If they beat Providence, though, and this is what I'm hoping, because they are doing everything that I planned or I thought they could do, and that was win in Creighton, which was a pretty remarkable game for them. And they rallied. That was a game where they rallied and took the lead at halftime, and everybody knows that they're almost unstoppable at halftime, although they lost to Villanova, being up by 3 at half in Nova. I would actually see this. They would have beaten 3 top 25 teams. They would have beaten 2 top 16 teams, because I can't remember where Nova is right now. I'm just going to say they're 11. But they're beating 2 teams that are projected to be a 3 and a 4 in the land, or maybe potentially a 2 and a 3. So if they beat those guys and I'm going to seed them at their lowest, you're looking at Seton Hall that could be a 5, maybe a 4, depending on where they go on that. Okay, so it's going to be a fun week, and this is the fun week. And then you have next week, of course, to look forward to and celebrate, because everyone who makes the tournament, I don't care whether you're the number 1 team in the land or, a team from quote unquote the weak conferences, it is to be celebrated. All right. You've had a remarkable season, a great season, and more than likely a winning season. Okay. Let's get to this. I got about 8 minutes with you, and I was going to save one thing, and I think I'll do it next week. But I'd like to talk about a couple of guys that I got to talking or I mentioned in last week's, the power hitters and how many times they hit home runs and all the rest of it. Let's just do, I think I mentioned Ed Roebuck. And I know he got hurt. He had a pretty good career despite his arm injuries and played in a couple of World Series. But the guy underneath him, well, let's just do Jimmy Gentile. Maybe I'll save the guy underneath, and that is Herman Weimeier. And the reason why I brought him up is that he was quite a number of times he was a victim of Aaron and Matthews. And, he not only was a victim of them in single home run games, but also in I think 2 or 3, as I recorded, where each great slugger hit home runs off him in the same game. Buzzhart was the same, was similar, Johnny Buzzhart, to Mays and McCovey as well. And you know what? Maybe I'll just save him for next week. And I'll just focus on Jimmy Gentile. And the funny thing is, there he is, Jimmy Gentile. Let me just run by this. Oh, and another thing, and I'm going to get into this. You talk about war, and someone explained war to me. Think about this. How does a guy who plays 113 games, 310 at-bats, 29 homers, 72 RBIs, scores 56 runs, hits .316, walks 75 times, and has a .451 on-base percentage? Now, I know he wouldn't have qualified for the batting title or the on-base percentage because you need a certain amount of at-bats and or plate appearances or both. But he finished 12th in the MVP. All right. And of the MVPs, he had, he also had a .645 slugging percentage, which was the highest of any of the 12 MVP or 11 MVP candidates in front of him. And in fact, the guy who won the MVP had a .581 slugging percentage in 136 games. So he only played 24 more games, 23. And this fellow had a slugging percentage that was 64 points higher. All right. The fellow who had the 136 games, great numbers across the board, 36 homers, 39 homers, 112 RBIs, 70 base on balls, 283 batting average, 371 on base percentage, 581 slugging. He scored 98 runs. That was Roger Maris, 1960. He had a 7.5 WAR. Now, I know he was a pretty good outfielder, and this all goes back. I know I didn't mention this last week, but this is what happens when you pull up the paper that you want to show, and you got Baseball Reference or another site right in front of you and say, oh, I wanted to tell you this. He led the league in RBIs with 112. So he had a good 40 RBI lead on this fellow who had a .316 batting average. But the fellow who had a .316 batting average, he didn't play for a pennant winner. He played for, in 1960, a team, ready for this? Let me just get it to you. A team that finished 65 and 89. There's another guy. Watch this. Played for the pennant-winning Yankees. Had 146 games played, 538 at-bats, 56 runs scored, but 98 hits, pardon me. But anyway, he had this other fella, and I'll name him. It's Bill Skowron, Moose Skowron. Played 146 games, scored 63 runs, had 26 homers, 91 RBIs. So he had 19 more RBIs. Hit .309, had a .353 on-base percentage with only 38 walks. His slugging percentage was .528. Ready for this? His WAR was 4.6. And I don't think, if you are a true baseball fan, I think you know where I'm coming from on this. Ted Williams, with 113 games, 29 homers, 72 RBIs, a .316 batting average, which was the highest batting average of any MVP in front of him. All right. Again, he doesn't qualify because he only played 113 games, had a .451 on-base percentage, higher than the 11 guys in front. He finished and the highest of all slugging percentage, .645. He had a 3.1 WAR. Please help me figure that out. Because 112 games, real quick, as I know I'm running up against the board, even if he played the other third of the season, the other 40 games, all right, I figured out he probably would have, let's say, 35 home runs, probably 90 RBIs, 92 RBIs, hit the .316. He'd probably have 94 runs scored, okay? And if I put Moose Gowron up to 154 games, I bet you he would have 28, and let's just give him 100. And yet his WAR is 4.6 and Williams is 3.1, a full 1.5 points. Now, if it was more like this, 3.9 to 4.4, I could live with it. So this WAR still rankles me. And you can say, well, Williams was old. He probably would have been better off as a DH. He was slow, 40 years old, yada, yada, yada. Moose was playing first base. Hey, and we'll talk more about this in future episodes. This is Will O'Toole. Thank you again for watching. Howard, shout out to you. Thank you again. And we'll be here next week with another edition.